So that's really it in terms of us talking with you, but we're open to lots of questions, and I figure the only stupid question is the one that remains unasked. So feel free to ask anything of any of us or Daryl. And before you leave, once we've had those questions, Helen has been handing out feedback sheets, I think, to everybody. So we really value your feedback. These sessions are about us all learning together. And the other thing that we need to do is there's an amazing group of staff sort of all standing up the back waiting for me to release you so that you can go and talk with them. So we've got, you want to just give us a wave if people can turn around. So Christy Simmons from Accommodation Support, Natasha Williams and Linda Brady from Individual Support, Sally Wall from Transcend, which is the mental health support branch of Karingal, Karen Bataro, did I pronounce it correctly, and Shelley from Participate, which is recreation and leisure and day service type activities. Shelley's up there as well, Sarah, yes. Karingal Commercial, we have Vanessa on the end there. Yes? Nice to see. Oh, Lisa, sorry, Vanessa. I knew it was Lisa and I was looking at you, but the wrong name came out. Sorry, Lisa. Nice to see you. So commercial, as Daryl said, is the supported employment part of Karingal. So if anyone's interested in supported employment, Lisa would be the person to speak with. We've got Mark Butcher and not Jess from Karingal Training. So if you're interested in doing some sort of certificate training or non-accredited training as well, you can access those options through Karingal Training. And Matchworks Disability Employment Service, Kirsten. Welcome, Kirsten. So thank you to all those Karingal staff who have given up some of their time this evening to be here to share information with you all. And Helen's waving at me. Oh, lucky door prize. Is that why everyone's here? Because there's a prize. A Geelong Cats home game membership. And Sarah, could you draw out a name out of that bag?
Sarah? That's a girl, yeah. This one. Girl. Who have we got?
Sam?
Yeah. Sam Burrell.
Sam Burrell, are you in the audience somewhere? Come forward, Sam. You've just won a Geelong Cats home membership. Woo-hoo. Well done, Sam. See, it was worth coming out tonight, wasn't it, just for the prize? So, can we just, before you break and do an activity, I think there's yes, we're going to go to questions, Helen, it's okay, yes. Before we break, to go to the tables and there's a recreation activity, I think. Who's running that for us? Fantastic, the guys from Participate are running that. Just before we do that, questions, queries, concerns, issues, feel free. Just pop your hand up and call out. You're being nominated again. Don't ever go to an auction with him, will you?
No one ever likes asking first.
They don't.
So I will.
Go, Brandon.
How do you choose a quality service?
Oh, how do you choose a quality service? I'm going to hand that one over to Lynn and Brian to start with, I think.
No, don't me. Hand it down to Lynn.
Hand it to Lynn first. You reckon we've heard enough from Brian, do you? So we'll go to Lynn.
You took the share.
Thanks, Sarah.
What have you been doing it?
What I did to find one of my providers, I actually interviewed about 4 providers. I mean, actually, they're all going to say they're going to be fantastic and they're going to meet my needs. But I guess I just had to try. One stood out because they did grooming. And I always had to look beautiful. Really, it's just a matter of try and error, basically, with all. Because, as I said, they're going to say they're going to be fantastic. They're not going to say, oh, don't pick us, we're terrible. So it's just a matter of trying. And I guess my first one, I only said 6 months. I'll give it a go. If it didn't work out, then I'd go back to the original one or find someone else. So, and that's what I did.
And when you said you interviewed them, Lynn, did you have some set questions that
Yes, I did have some set questions. I asked them what their training was like. I wanted people that came in that knew how to do hoisting, that I needed to have someone to come in swimming with me because some of the people that coming in, they didn't like chlorine, they were allergic, and they didn't let me know, and all those sort of things. So I had a set questions when I asked them. And also, just as if you're cancelling a shift, how long does it take, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so I did.
For Barbara and I and Sarah, when we moved to Geelong, we'd lived at Ocean Grove for a long time. When we moved to Geelong, we had to change doctors. And I would think the same question applies to how do you get a new doctor? Where do you begin? Well, I think you begin by talking to some other people. And what was of particular interest to us was someone who would have empathy with a person with disability, really attuned to that. So we finished up getting a doctor who had a son with a disability and was quite involved in the Geelong area with an organisation associated with disability. Now, that got us to the step, let's at least go along and we'll decide to interview him. So along we went and said, we're not asking permission here, we're coming to check you out. And that's what we did. We questioned him and so on around that. So how do you choose a disability, a service? I think exactly the same sort of way.
Great, thank you. Probably the only bit I'd add to that is if I was choosing a quality service for a loved one, I'd probably look at a service that was willing to learn with me, because the NDIS is a brand new world for all of us. So we're all in the process of learning together, and I think that's one of the, from my perspective, and I'm not a Kooringal employee, so I'm not sitting up here just blowing their trumpet. Kooringal very much is committed to learning with people with a disability and their families about how we all get the best outcome within the new world that is the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So probably one of the questions I'd ask a service provider is, how will you help me negotiate the NDIS world? Other queries?
Are
Or
there people that can help you with that choice as well? An independent organisation?
Look, there's lots of independent organisations out there. Ultimately, they probably wouldn't help you make the final choice, because agencies wouldn't want you coming back and saying, oh, but you recommended service X and it hasn't worked out for me. But there are lots of services like VALID, the Victorian Advocacy League for Individuals with a Disability, Barwon Disability Resource Council, REAC, a whole range of services that are independent of the service provider system that could probably help you if you weren't sure how to come up with a list of questions that you might want to ask, that can assist with that sort of process.
I asked that there's also service intermediary plan management as well, which will help with the different services and give you options as well.
Yes, so the plan.
Part of your plans.
Yes, so the plan managers and service intermediary providers, so as Brian mentioned, there's one in Barwon called Green Pie, there's others called Moira Plan Management Provider. Are you from?
Leisure Networks.
Leisure Networks do plan management. So the plan managers, well, in some sense, they're independent. If they sit within a service provider like Leisure Networks, they're probably not quite as independent as something like Green Pie or Moira, who sit a bit separate to the service system, but that's part of their role as well. So if you have that funding in your plan, they can assist you with your shopping around to buy services.
And just talking to friends and things like that, you always, because I'm on so many committees, I know the services around. So it was just a matter of asking people. You know which ones are bad and which ones are good when you start chatting to people. Not saying they're bad and good anyway, because that's their ideas.
And I think that's one thing to be careful of, isn't it,
Yeah,
Lynn, that
exactly.
sometimes that a person may have had a bad experience with a service provider, but that doesn't mean that service provider is not necessarily going to be the right service provider for you. So I think in a smallish place like Geelong, where the grapevine works really quickly, as we know, you need to take on board what you're hearing, but then assess it for yourself, because sometimes it is just an unfortunate, it's a bit like there's no such thing as a perfect school. There's no such thing as a perfect service provider that will meet the needs of every person with a disability and every family, because that's an impossible ask, the same as no school will absolutely perfectly meet the need of every student in that school. So I think we've got to look at it through that lens.